So today I want to share the exact moment I became disgusted with my own so-called frugality. And I drew a watch and a lady here, and this is all going to be relevant soon, so pay attention. But I think to begin, I think it's important to give you some context. In 2016, I graduated with an accounting and finance degree. So I know my money, right? I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. That was the first nonfiction book that I read right out of high school. And I was then obsessed with saving money. Around this time, I also discovered the FIRE movement. And so FIRE stands for financial independence. Sounds nice, right? How do we get there? Well, we it's retire early. How do we retire early? By saving money and investing it. And I wasn't making that much money, right? So I had to save a lot of money. And I think it was hard for me to find a job in Canada because I had a business degree, but I didn't want to go into business. And so I ended up actually going into education. And so I became an economics teacher. Not only that, because I couldn't find a job in Canada, I became an economics teacher in China. Yeah. Now, the good news about becoming a teacher in China is that China is cheap to live in. And so while I wasn't getting paid that much, I was probably just getting paid around 30K a year. Actually ended up saving 70% of my income. And flash forward a few years, right? So like 3 years later, I'm making somewhere around like 60 to 80,000 because I changed schools. I have a few more years of experience, and it's a very fragmented market. So some schools pay more, some schools pay less. At this point, I also had a down payment on a home, and so I put an initial 5% down, and I had 3 years to save the other 15%, which was about 90K. And this was on a 60 to $80,000 per year income, and I had 2 years to save this amount. And granted, this is before tax. So after tax, I probably had like 50K. And so in that moment, for those 2 years, I probably saved 80 to 90% savings. I was frugal and I was proud of it, right? I was a happy camper. I lived in a building, right? And it was a school dormitory. And it was advertised very nicely because it was this is my rendition of a dock. It was overlooking this lake. The only problem with the lake was that it was stagnant and not maintained at all. And so twice a year, right here at this part of the lake, there would be flies that would look like mosquitoes, and it would be breeding season. And so if this was the building and it was gray, the front of the building would just be covered in these bugs, and I couldn't open the window at all. Because if I opened the window, thousands of these bugs would fly in, and they would die just the next day. And I remember just walking to work, and on the ground in the morning, if I was taking the path to work, on the ground in the morning, there would be just bugs everywhere. And like there would literally be like a janitor just like every morning just weeping away bugs with a broom. So that was my life, and I was proud because I saved bank. I saved so much money. So that was where I came from. I didn't make that much money, right? After tax, 50K. That's kind of like an average American salary, but I saved 80 to 90% of that. So how did I go from this? I would say I'm pretty frugal, right? How did I go from this kind of frugal human being to being totally disgusted with my own frugality? Well, flash forward another few years. I'm working at another school. I'm probably making around 70 to 80K a year before tax, something like that. And I'm still living this frugal lifestyle. And I really didn't have a chance to spend money because of COVID. And I meet this girl, my now wife. And I guess it was just a clash of cultures because I came from a background where I expected that I would split the bill, right? Having romantic relationships in Canada, I know a lot of times girls appreciate the guy paying and all of that. But one of my previous girlfriends really appreciate splitting the bill because there was a certain sense of independence from like splitting the bill, right? Why do I need to depend on a man? Deal. And so like this kind of became my understanding of how relationships worked. We would just 50-50 it, right? Half half. So this was Canada, right? Like, so if I draw a maple leaf, this was Canadian culture. But Chinese culture, I don't even remember. I don't even know what the Chinese flag is, so I'll just write China. It's got stars, but I don't really know where they are. But Chinese culture is literally the guy pays, right? Or at least in my then girlfriend, now wife's world, there's no such thing. Splitting anything, not just a bill, splitting anything was disrespectful. My wife was literally like, hey, if you're going to split the bill, then I'm just going to pay for everything. And me being the independent Canadian man that I was, I obviously didn't want to rely on my wife, who didn't make as much money as me, to pay for everything. And so I manned up. I paid for rent, I paid for meals, and that was that. And I was like, oh, so life is pretty good, right? So I'm obviously not saving 80%. My 80% savings rate is gone. And I remember there was this one day when I was walking in a mall with my wife and her friend, and it was a luxury mall, right? So it had LV, it had Gucci, it had Prada, right? And we were just shopping, and we were at Gucci because I didn't know what to get her dad, right? So my father-in-law. I was going to meet him for the first time, and it was a big deal in China for someone to bring their significant other, girlfriend, boyfriend, home to meet parents, and it's a tradition and custom to bring gifts whenever we go meet each other's parents, right? And so I was like, what do I get this guy that I've never met before? And so I was like, you can't go wrong with like something expensive, right? And so I saved up some money, and we went to Gucci and we got a bag for her dad. And this was not frugal at all, but I didn't mind because it was a gift, right? I valued the relationship, right? I'm not going to buy Gucci bags every single time, right? So it was a gift for the relationship. And so I was like, let's do it. And on our way out, we passed by a little watch shop, not very little, called Omega. And I had actually been interested in the Moon Watch for a while. And the Moon Watch was this $7,000 watch that literally went to the moon, right? And so my wife was like, well, let's go in and let's check it out. Right. And so we checked out the watch, right? I wore the watch, and they actually had two different versions. They had the old version, and this was a few years back when they were coming out with a new version. And obviously this was more expensive. This was just expensive. And so I tried both. And obviously I thought this one looked better and it felt better. But this one I felt like had collector's value because they were changing editions, and maybe the price of this will go up in the future because the quantity is going to go down. It's going to be limited, right? So I tried on the watches, and I kid you not, something unexpected happened, right? My wife was like, here's what she said. My wife was like, if you like it, I'll buy it for you. And I was like, this was my reaction, right? I was kind of in shock because not only had I never worn such an expensive watch, I hadn't even bought a watch for myself ever. And it was like, and I had been alive for 30 years at that point, well, 29 years. And all the watches that I've worn were literally hand-me-downs for my dad. And so I've never bought my own watch. And my wife, my then girlfriend, now wife, was literally like, "Hey, if you want this $7,000 watch, I'll just buy it for you." And I was kind of like, "Sure," because I was half expecting her to be like, not expecting that I would actually say sure, right? And so I was like, "Sure." And at that point, I had a mix of fear. I was like thinking like, is this actually gonna happen? And a little bit of anxiety as well. Like, is what's actually gonna happen, right? And then my wife was like, if you like it, I'm gonna get it for you. And she bought the watch. And that was 3 years ago. And it's the watch I wear to this day. And I remember getting my hands on this huge box, like, because it's premium. And so they obviously can't just give you a watch. They have to like give you this huge box that was super heavy, and like the watch was inside, kind of deal. I was holding onto this huge box, and there was a mix of feelings. One was shock. Is this really happening? Did this really just happen? There was a little bit of remorse because I was like, this is damn expensive. This was $7,000, right? And for somebody that made 50K after tax, it was a lot of money. And thinking about it back then for my wife who made less money than me, that was a lot of money for her too, right? But above the shock and remorse, I felt blessed. And this is not like, oh my God, God is good, blessed, I'm so blessed, kind of blessed. This was like someone I loved treated their money as if it wasn't important at all. The exact opposite of how I treated my money and how I used my money to treat people, because I didn't buy gifts for other people, right? To give you perspective, for my wife's Christmas, I got her a puzzle. And don't get me wrong, she loves puzzles. And so that's why I got her a puzzle that she liked, that she wanted to buy but didn't. When we passed by a shop, I noted it down and I bought it for her. I got her a puzzle and she loved it, right? But she got me an LV wallet. It was expensive. And I was like, all right, it's a Christmas gift. I got it. But it wasn't on the level of an Omega watch that was $7,000, which was a lot of money to me at that time. And so I felt blessed. I was like, for someone that values their money so much, seeing someone give that up just because I wanted it was mind-blowing, right? She didn't value her money at all when it came to making me happy, essentially, in that moment in time. And that was the moment that shook me. And when I was all these years, I've been so just cheap and careful with my money and spending it on others, especially. And then all of a sudden, my wife just, my then girlfriend, now wife, just on a whim spends $7,000 to get a watch for me because she loves me. And so from that moment, I had to ask myself the big question: would I do the same? And the answer was, I must, because I love her. I love this woman. And that was the moment when my mindset shifted from I'm living frugally for myself, right? So frugal for me, to I'm living generously for us. But I had a problem, right? The problem was I still wanted financial independence. And so how am I going to get financial independence if I'm buying Gucci and we're buying Omega watches? Well, buying Gucci and Omega watches isn't the point, right? My wife is not a big spender. Well, at least not anymore. My wife is just someone that has her priorities straight. And her priority, now our priority, is family. Above all, we care for each other, we care for the ones we love, our little kid, and we want the best life for us. And the best life for us, unfortunately, isn't a life where I'm living in a building where I can't open my windows and all my blinds are closed because there are bugs trying to come into the building. That is not the best life for us. And so that's when I thought of the idea of new financial minimalism, what became known to me as new financial minimalism. Was there a way for me to save money, build wealth, and enjoy life? And the answer is a resounding yes, right? And so this is what led to me thinking about daily spending, right? This is where what led me to think about like cash flow clarity, right? This is what eventually helped me build my lifetime investment thesis, right? This is what drives me to build a business. All so I can. Why am I doing this, right? All because I want to give the people I love the life they deserve, okay? And this life doesn't come from frugality, okay? This life comes from accountability. This life doesn't come from extreme saving, right? Because this to me is a form of a lack of clarity. This is a form of anxiety because I never know if I have enough, and so I better save as much as possible, or I don't know how much is enough, so I'm going to save as much as possible just in case, right? And so we don't want that, right? We want extreme clarity, right? We want extreme clarity around our desired life. We want extreme clarity around our investment thesis. We want extreme clarity around our willing sacrifices. So, what is the life that you actually want with your family, and how much money do you actually need? What is your investment thesis, right? That will help you build wealth that you can rely on your whole life without changing, because then you can automate. When it comes to rational decision making, which is what we value in investing, we are our own worst enemies. And so if we can automate, the chances of us succeeding over time improves drastically. And then what are our willing sacrifices? What are we willing to sacrifice today to get this desired life? And what are we not willing to sacrifice today to get our desired life? For example, I am not willing to sacrifice buying cheap formula for my baby son. That is not what I'm willing to sacrifice. I am not willing to sacrifice buying car seats or strollers that are unsafe but cheap for my son. That's just something I have clarity around, right? And so, since adopting this new framework of moving away from traditional fire and frugality and like thinking about accountability and gaining clarity, I've been able to make more money, right? So now my total compensation package before tax is at 100K. I've been able to make more money, but most importantly, I've been able to spend without guilt. And the reason is because I know, I am certain I will retire financially independent. And I know again that my path and my life towards financial independence is the path I desire and won't regret, right? I don't want to be 60 and have saved all this money and be too old to go on vacation, right? Go diving. That's not the life I want to build, right? And so I guess this video is just a video of me trying to give you the moment when I realized that frugality wasn't for me, and how I actually found a workaround that works, right? And so the workaround can be summarized in really three big pillars. Okay, so if you don't take anything away, just take away these three pillars. And so pillar number one is what I call a philosophy. Like philosophy, but your financial philosophy, right? And so this is shared. So this is a family philosophy. I don't know if you've ever sat down with your significant other and talked about all the different dimensions that we can talk about money in, like debt, like credit cards, spending, saving, investing, the life you want to lead, the kind of life you're leading right now. What's our most pressing financial goal, right? That is all part of a philosophy. And we want a shared philosophy because we want unity, right? Because with unity, we can set goals, okay? And only when we set goals can we identify actions, right? But part of setting goals means you need to know where you are at right now, right? And so you need to have what I call cash flow clarity. And so how is the money coming in, right? So these are arrows. And how is the money going out? And so there are really a few categories, right? And so these are your financial statements. So in accounting, we have financial statements. And so the next thing is, are these optimized for goals? Okay. And so we have philosophy, we have cash flow clarity, and then the last part is automated growth. And so this is defining the numbers for investments, right? This is like understanding retirement accounts. This is understanding automations for spending and saving. So if we have our beliefs, right, then we have an understanding of our present and future, right? And in a sense, our beliefs are shaped by our past, right? And then finally, if we have our beliefs, right, which come from our past, which will help us understand the actions, right, that we are engaging in the present, and the kind of future we're building towards right now, then we can change, right? We can start building, right? Building, changing. And the whole idea of automation is to make it simple. I guess that's not cool. Simple. That's the idea behind this whole thing.